Thank you so much for listening to this live recorded teaching of our Sunday gathering at Proclamation Church. Our hope is that this teaching reminds you of the love that Jesus has for you. If you're in the area, we invite you to join us in person at one of our Sunday gatherings at 9 o'clock or 10:45 a.m. Our desire is for you to come and be part of what God is doing here. To find out more about Proclamation Church or to support the mission and vision of our church, visit us at proclamationtn.com. We'll see you soon.
Have you ever noticed in our culture how hard it is for people to wait, right? Amazon Prime, anyone, right? We're super thankful for that. We can get something really fast, and as soon as we know that that thing is out for delivery, how often are we checking it to make sure, like, okay, you're in my neighborhood, hurry up and get here, right? When it comes to our iPhones, we're constantly hitting refresh on apps, and when we're surfing the web and when we pull down to refresh and scroll, and when that circle is like going and going and going, we're like, yo, what's taking it so long to go ahead and give me the information that I need, right? Anything that takes longer than 3 seconds, we get frustrated with, right? We live in a world that runs on speed and convenience, and we so often forget or we don't notice that we are quietly being discipled by these things. So much so that when something seems to take so long, we just automatically assume it must be broken, right? We don't wait for information anymore, we refresh. We don't wait for growth, we scroll. We don't wait for answers, we Google, right? All these things are right here. And every part of our culture is designed to remove friction, to shorten delay. And the results is that we have become allergic to waiting. If it doesn't happen fast, we assume, well, I guess it's not happening at all, right? When we get down to the heart of it, that's why so often silence feels like failure. Like when we are in positions where we're called to be still, we feel stuck. We feel like when we're supposed to be waiting, it feels like we're wasting time. I know I can't be the only one that feels this way, right? What if I threw at you today that waiting isn't a problem to fix, it's the spot where God is actually forming us? That's exactly what we see here in Exodus 32. God's people are standing at the base of Mount Sinai, right? They've seen the miracles, the manna, the Red Sea part. They just declared in front of everyone that they would do everything that God had laid out for them to do. And now they're in this position where they have to wait. Moses has been gone for 40 days. No updates, no notifications, no new content coming down from, the mountain. Just silence. And when the waiting goes longer than what they were expected, then the silence began to stretch past their comfort zone. And there's something in them that starts to ache. You wanna know why? I believe it's because silence has a way of surfacing in our lives what we really trust. Listen, as we look at this story today, I think it's easy to read Exodus 32 and immediately assume rebellion. Man, I think there's some rebellion here, but I think what's taking place first is restlessness. It's this twitch in our soul that whispers, you know what, maybe I should just take things into my own hands. It's that little thought that's in our minds, hey, if God's not gonna do something, then maybe I'll just do it. And so they do what we all do when it feels like God has taken so long. They reach for control. They reach for something to build. They gather their gold, they melt it down, they build it into something that they can see, something that's tangible, something that's predictable, something that they can manage. Isn't that so human? Isn't that so true of us? Listen, when faith feels uncertain, control feels like relief, right? And again, I think it's easy to just jump into the rebellion piece, but I would say it's less about rebellion and more about desperation. We're desperate people. But desperation without trust can oftentimes lead to idolatry. And this is what we see here. If we can't learn to wait on God, we'll start to worship what works. And eventually, what we build begins to own us. And so, here's my main idea for us today, okay? I want us to capture this idea, and it's going to shape everything that we talk about for the rest of our hour and 25 minutes, okay? Okay. Oh, you guys giving me permission to go that long. Great. You ain't protest. It's on you, all right? Listen, when God seems silent, we're tempted to build what we can control. But true consecration learns to wait, it learns to trust, and it learns to believe that God is still working in the silence. That was long, okay? So one of two things. Either you take a picture of it or I'm gonna say it again. I'll say it again because Katie wants me to. All right. When God seems silent, we're tempted to build what we can control. But true consecration, it learns to wait, it learns to trust, and it learns to believe that God is still working in the silence. That's good, right? Let's see if it's still gonna be good once we get into this. All right. This story opens up with a single word that we read right past, and it's so quick for us to just be so familiar with the story, right? It's the single word, delay. Look at verse 1. When the people saw that Moses delayed in coming down from the mountain, okay? Moses, again, has been on the mountain now at this point for over 40 days. That's over a month, okay? No word, no sign, no leader. And from below, we have to remember, this mountain doesn't look really holy. It doesn't look really inviting, right? Still a lot of thunder, still a lot of lightning, still a lot of booming and moving, right? And to them, it doesn't look like Moses is having a conversation with God. To them, it looks like, well, maybe Moses is burnt up. So what happens? They gathered around Aaron and they said to him, now, let's stop there. They do what people often do when they feel abandoned. They get together and they start talking. Do you feel the way that I feel? Right? Are you processing some of the things that I'm processing? Are you walking through the things that I'm walking through here? They gather and they begin to talk. And the Hebrew language here, it suggests a level of intensity, which means they don't just gather and have a conversation. They essentially are mobbing Aaron here at this point. And what do they say? Make gods for us who will go before us, because this Moses, the man who brought us up from the land of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. This isn't some polite committee meeting. This is panic. And when we panic, we start to try to make plans. That line, this Moses, doesn't that sound like distance to you? Like this guy, right? No longer our leader, no longer the one that God chose. This guy, where is he? What's he doing? Where is he at? And isn't that how that often happens in our lives, right? When waiting stretches long enough, disappointment can turn devotion into cynicism. This guy that led us and has shown us so far and has been speaking to God on our behalf, that guy, right? We start to think that maybe the promises that God have laid out, maybe they aren't real. Maybe God's not coming through this time. And so here's what's so interesting about what's taking place here, okay? They still want guidance. Like they still want a God. They want someone, but they want someone that they can control. So what happens? Aaron, the priest, the guy who's set apart to be the priest, the mouthpiece of God, he caves to pressure instead of standing firm. Verse 2, what happens? Aaron replied to them, all right, take off the gold rings that are on the ears of your wives, your sons, and your daughters and bring them to me. Now remember, this gold's not random, right? It was the very gold that God gave them in Egypt. Exodus 12, remember that all those months ago, right? God, when Israel was about to leave out of Egypt, God said, hey, go to the Egyptians, ask for their gold. And the Egyptians was like, yup, take it and get out of our face, right? He gave them this gold, this gift. This was supposed to be a testimony to God's deliverance for them. This was supposed to be a sign to say, hey, I am a gracious God to you. I give good gifts. And now they've taken this reminder of grace and about to melt it into an idol. And that's the tragedy of idolatry. It often begins with God's good gifts. We take what he gave us for worship and praise for him and repurpose it for self-assurance. Now here's something that's easy for us to also miss, because again, if you grew up in church, you've heard this story. Even if you haven't grown up in church, I'm sure you've caught wind of the golden calf in some capacity if you're hearing things about religion and the Bible and stuff like that. Here's what's easy for all of us to miss, okay? This gold was supposed to be used for the tabernacle. You guys remember that a couple weeks ago? Right? This was supposed to be the thing that God was going to use to dwell with his people. He said, hey, if you have a willing heart, bring the gold, bring the fine things. But instead, it becomes a god to them. And so what happens in verse 3? All the people took off the gold rings that were on their ears and brought them to Aaron. They bring it all to Aaron, they dump it at his feet. And what we see is that their idolatry was funded by their fear. Listen, loved ones, the moment you and I begin to feel powerless, we will start doing whatever we can to make sure we can get control again. And we see this happening here. Look at verse 4. He took the gold from them and fashioned it with an engraving tool. Two things that's haunting, at least to me as I read this, right? The fact that he took the gold from them. He took it. Like he doesn't resist. Like it's like he doesn't question, he just takes it. Again, remember a couple of weeks ago when God is telling them to bring the gold, he says, hey, I want willing hearts to bring it, right? And now we see Aaron say, no, give that to me. He doesn't resist. He takes what's being offered. And sometimes, again, idolatry doesn't begin with some evil intention. It begins with a leader who just won't say no. Begins with us not saying no. Then comes the tool here. This language that's used here can mean engraving tool, or it can even mean a weapon. So the image, if that's true, the image is stark here. The very tool that was meant to be craft to worship are now used as weapons against holiness. And so what does he do? He turns this into an image of a calf. That's random. Like if you read this story and you've never asked why a cow, you're not reading it the right way. Like I read that, I was like, that doesn't make any sense to me. He shapes it into a random calf. But when you understand the significance of a calf during this particular time, the calf was a symbol of fertility and power in Egypt. It was strong. In this case, it was shiny and it was safe. It was something that they could see and they could touch, right? And when it's all finished, the people say, Israel, these are your gods who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. It's almost unthinkable. They have legit seen Yahweh do all these amazing things. They have seen him operate. They have seen him split a sea. They have seen him drown an army. They've seen him rain bread down from heaven. And now they credit all of their salvation and all of their gifts to a random statue. Guys, this is what idolatry does. It distorts our memory. We begin forgetting everything that God has done. It rewrites history. And then it rewrites history so that we feel justified in whatever rebellion we're bringing. They want this feeling of worship without the submission of worship. Again, they want a God that they can admire, ultimately not a God that they can obey. And we do the same. We want a God that's close enough for comfort, but not close enough to convict. And so we reshape. And unfortunately, it doesn't end there. Look at verse 5. When Aaron saw this, he built an altar in front of it and made an announcement. There will be a festival to the Lord tomorrow. Now, this is where things get really twisted. They don't call it a pagan festival. They call it a festival to who? The Lord. When you read it here in Scripture, the Lord, it's capital L-O-R-D. If you remember when we studied Exodus early on, right? That's Yahweh. That like they are still thinking about God here. It's so interesting. They are using God's name. I would be so bold as to say, again, that this isn't open rebellion, it's confusion. This, loved ones, is what's called syncretism. Syncretism is blending like the true image of God into false images. So what we're seeing happen in here right before our very eyes is they've rebranded idolatry as good godly worship. My goodness. Now here's the thing, syncretism, I said that, you're like, what? All right, syncretism may be a new word for you in your vocabulary, but it's an action that you and I are so familiar with. We are so quick to baptize our ambitions with Christian language. We attach God's name to the things that were never his idea to begin with. And then we say, well, this is for the Lord, when in actuality, it's really for us. You know, there was a buddy of mine who on Instagram, he posted this and I was like, screenshot, I'm gonna use that, that's good. He said this, he said, could you imagine Aaron telling Moses, but the people were so engaged in worship at this time? And then he goes on to say, many of our modern day churches operate under, quote, if it works, God must be in it. That's the theology of the church. If we operate by that standard, then guess what? The golden calf was a success. My. Yo, when we get down to it, the altar that Aaron is making here, it looks holy. He said, hey, this is to Yahweh. This is for the Lord. But hear me say this. Holiness isn't just found in the structure, it's found in the surrender of our hearts. Their hearts weren't surrendered to God in this. They were doing what felt good to them. And so now they've got this calf, they've got this altar, they got this plan. And everything looks completely organized. But listen, the presence of order doesn't mean that the presence of God is there. And so what do? We're like, we gonna keep it pushing. Verse 6, early the next morning, they rose up, they offered burnt offerings and presented fellowship offerings. The people sat down to eat and drink and got up to party. They woke up eager and energized and sincere in their worship. They think they're worshiping God, but their sincerity is pointed in the wrong direction here. And in our reading, it says that they got up to party. In other translations, it said that they indulged in revelry. When you look at the language there, essentially it could mean playing or laughter or drinking or what they were doing, or it could even mean sexual indulgence, orgies. This is what was taking place here. Like, this wasn't worship, loved ones, it was entertainment. What began as anxiety for them led them to apathy. Like, their desperation fueled this debauchery. So when worship loses its center, it will always drift towards some level of indulgence. Because if God isn't on the throne, listen to me, something or someone else is. And the majority of the time, we are the ones that are sitting on the throne. We are the ones that are trying to figure out, okay, how can I please myself? If God's presence isn't here, man, how do I bring pleasure for myself? This is in the story where it all begins to collapse. They are people rescued by grace. They're surrounded by provision. They're standing in the shadow of God's glory at the foot of the mountain. And yet in the midst of all that, they are bowing down to something that they made with their own hands. Loved ones, if you zoom out of Exodus 32, it isn't really just a story about people who abandoned God. It's a story about people who couldn't handle waiting on him. Again, it's easy for us to immediately just jump to rebellion. What we see taking shape here is restlessness. And that's what makes Exodus 32 so relatable to us. Let me ask you a question. What do you do when it feels like God is taking too long? Think about it. It's when our prayers are met with silence, when we're waiting for some level of clarity, it's very rare for you and I to start shaking our fist at God. Instead, what we so regularly do, we start to build. We start to take matters in our own hands. We create things that make us feel like we're the ones in charge, even if it's just an illusion. That's what we see happening here in Exodus 32. This story isn't just about ancient idol worship. It's about the modern day heart. It's about what we do when God feels quiet. So, I've got 5 things to show us, and I mean it. 5 things to show us about the modern day heart and this story that I think is so relatable to us. And my hope is for us to see that God is calling us into something greater. You ready for this? What does this story show us about our heart? Number 1, we long for control way more than we long for God. At the heart of this passage is this uncomfortable truth that we crave control way more than we do communion. We want a relationship with God that we can predict, one that we can control, one that we can manage, one that we can explain. Essentially, what that tells us is, man, we want a spiritual life that feels safe. The Israelites had seen God do some miraculous things. Every time I think about it, I'm just so floored. You saw the plagues. You saw the parted sea. You walked through it. You've been tasting manna. You've seen the quails. You felt the ground shake under the thunderous voice of God. But now that he's silent, memory gone. Just fades away. You want to know why? This is what I believe. I believe that miracles may inspire faith for a moment, but only intimacy sustains it over time. They didn't know it yet, but God's silence wasn't punishment. I would go so far as to say that this was an invitation of trust, to trust that he was still working even when they couldn't see it. Like, stop and think about it, the times in your life. Think about a time when God's silence made you reach for control instead of trust. It happens all the time. And it looks different for every single one of us. But I think for many of us, we all have a story of seeking control when we can't see what God is doing. So we try to figure it out ourselves. And because they couldn't see it, they couldn't bear the unknown. And so they traded the mystery of the unknown for management. And that's what idolatry does. It does a lot of things, but one of the things that it does, it's a trade-off. Stop and think about it, right? You got faith here, then it's like, nah, let me figure out some formula to figure things out. You've got presence of God here. Man, let me trade it out for my performance. Let me try to earn what God can give me, right? Like, there's trust on this side. I can trust God for who he is. Man, I need some results here. It happens all the time. It's a trade. But my goodness, loved ones, control feels comforting for a moment. It's the feeling of doing something. But idols will always take more than what they give. That's part of the nature of idolatry. Which leads us to the second thing, what our hearts typically do. We turn gifts into gods. Again, notice how the Israelites' idol began with something God gave them. This gold from Egypt, right? Like, the gold in and of itself wasn't evil, it was grace. And we now remember that this gold was supposed to be used to be turned into the tabernacle, right? A place for God's presence to dwell, but instead it becomes a material for something false. Something meant to remind them of God becoming something that replaces him. And again, we do this all the time. We will take very good gifts, work, relationships, our spouses, our kids, our families, the ministries that he's called us to do, and we will let those things carry a weight that they were never designed for. It happens so naturally for us. There are good things in your life right now that you are putting on them a God-sized expectation that they were not created for. We want our spouses and our kids and our jobs and our relationships. We want all those things to give us only what God can give us. Identity, safety, security, significance. And when those things can't give us those things, what do? We push harder. We keep trying. We expect more. And then at the end of the day, at the end of it all, we end up more exhausted. That's what idols do. They start as something we can use, and then they end up being something that actually uses us. Can I ask you a question? Where have you felt exhausted recently? I'm not talking about just like sleepy, because I'm sleepy all the time, right? I'm talking about something that you keep trying and pushing and putting expectations on, and when it lets you down, you just get so exhausted. And you get so frustrated. It's like, why do I feel this way? We take good jobs and good relationships and delicious food, and we take those good things and we allow those things to begin to own us. And I'll be honest with you, okay? Those things, for a moment, can satisfy. They feel good. They do. But we also know that those things can't sustain us. They most definitely can't sustain our souls. We can hold on to them, they ain't holding us. We can try to shape them, they ain't shaping us. Only God can do those things. And not only that, like the shaping component of it, God will shape us for sure, but he does it in the quiet work that we actually see playing out in this text. Which leads us to number 3 this morning. You ready for this? He's still writing grace while we're still building gold. Listen, oh man, this is the hallelujah moment. You wanna know what's so stunning about this story? It's what's happening at the same time that all this is going on. When Israel is in the valley melting gold, God is still on the mountain writing out these commandments, forming out this relationship with his people. They're building something false while at the same time he's up there crafting something faithful. Can I ask you a question? Do you think God was surprised what was happening right now in this moment? No, we're gonna see that next week. Go ahead and come on back, right? While all this is going, we didn't keep on reading, but he looks at Moses and he said, yo, they down there tripping. Go ahead and deal with them, right? He knows what's going on. But while it's happening, he's still faithful to them. That is the heart of God for us. He does not stop being faithful when you and I patience run out. Yo, I'm about to preach. His silence is not absence, family. He is patient with you and I. Even when we are building our idols, he doesn't walk away from us. He comes down the mountain and he will confront us next week. But his confrontation isn't to just expose us, it's to reform us, it's to restore us. That's the type of God he is. Listen, write this down. This story shows us that God's grace doesn't just meet us after our failures, it is active during them. What would change in your life this week if you really believe that God is still writing a story of grace behind the scenes? Like what would happen to you if you really believe that? Like, while this is going on, he is writing a rescue plan while they are still busy forming their idols. When that truth begins to penetrate the deepest parts of our hearts and our souls, we can begin to see the invitation that he is bringing us into, this slow work of formation, which lets us know, number 4, waiting isn't wasted. What do I mean by that? The wilderness always has a way of exposing what we really trust. Always. when there's no manna yet, when there's no miracle that's taken place yet, there's no movement yet, what's left? That is always one of the questions of consecration. It's not just will I worship when God delivers, it's will I worship when he delays. That's a challenge right there, boy. Waiting is never wasted. It is where God is detaching our hearts from false security and giving us another opportunity to root us again in his love. But can I be real? Waiting oftentimes feels like dying. If it ain't you, I'll say it. Something in us breaks when we can't control the outcome. You ready for this? That breaking that's taking place, that's sacred work. That's good work. Because maybe that's the sound of your idol starting to crumble. That's good work. Waiting is not God withholding blessing. It is his patience to us to reorder our desires. He's teaching us to want him more than just the things that he can give us. It's so easy for us to want the good gifts because they're good, right? But what would it look like for us to want God more than just the things that he can give us? Here's a heart question for us this morning. Could it be that the silence we're resenting is actually the space where God is restoring you? What would it look like for us to start seeing the wilderness as holy ground? Like where God is actually breaking our dependence on proof so he can rebuild our dependence on him and his presence. That's the invitation that's actually hidden in this story. Ready for number 5 this morning? You don't have to build anymore. You don't have to build anymore. Listen, it is going to be so easy for us to just hear the invitation out of this is like, okay, don't build idols. Got it. Check. Thanks, Pastor. That was a good word. That's surface level. That's easy, right? Don't walk away with that this morning. The invitation for us is that we don't have to build anymore. I don't have to create something to make me feel safe. I don't have to strive to prove that God is working. I don't have to control what only he can carry. You see the difference? The God who seems silent is still present even in the midst of our waiting. Like he may be delayed, but my God, does he deliver? The God who feels absent, he never left the mountain. Like again, he knows what's happening down there. He could have said, you know what, Moses, scratch this. I'm going to transfigure you over here. We're going to go to a new people. You get that? No transfiguration? Just me? Okay, cool. He could have did that, but he didn't, right? He's still present with them. Like idolatry is going to tell us, hey, do something now. Faith says, wait, he's doing something better. He's doing something better. Like when we cannot see what God is doing, we can trust who he is. We can. He's faithful. He's patient. He's still present. This is who he is. So here's the truth underneath all of this, okay? When God seems silent, he is not gone. He is still at work. And when you feel like building, he is inviting you to simply believe. The wilderness is not where he forgets us, loved ones. It's where he is forming us. And if you let him, the silence that you were so scared about can actually become the space where he begins to sanctify you. When he begins to make you more like the image of his son. It's great. How do we respond then? I'm glad that you asked, okay? Listen, this formation, this understanding, this truth, it doesn't just happen by accident, okay? The Israelites didn't just need new intentions, they needed new practices. You wanna know why it was so easy for them to build the calf? Again, we look at that and we're like, well, that's random. That was a very specific idol for the Egyptians. So for them, that made sense. It was a part of their very nature, right? Let's make this a little bit more practical. It's so easy for us to run back to our sin nature, to run back to the idols. Why? Because that's what we're used to. That's what feels comfortable. Those are the things that we know. But here's the reality. If they needed new practices, so do we. If the golden calf was born out of fear and impatience and anxiety and a need for control, then the way back to consecration is through practices that will train us to wait and to rest and to trust. Listen, I had like 5 things that I want to share with you this morning on what this practice looks like. I'm just gonna give you one. And the reason why I only wanna give you one is because spiritual maturity is rarely about doing more. And I think it's easy for us to go through a list of things like, okay, I gotta do this, do this, do this. Listen, I would say it's more about learning to stop doing the things that keep us from trusting God. So, the one thing that I wanna give us today, you ready for this? We need to learn to practice trust in our waiting. We need to learn to practice trust in our waiting. If the golden calf was birthed from fear and impatience and the need for control, then the way back to consecration is not through striving. It's through trust. This is the practice of waiting well. Is learning to live with open hands when everything in you wants to grab hold on to something. It's slowing down long enough to remember that peace doesn't come from control. It comes from confidence in God and who he is. Listen, when Moses was up in the mountain delaying, anxiety filled the camp. And anxiety always comes and it looks for an outlet. For Israel, it was action, right? Hey, let's go ahead and build these gods here. And when fear rises, we rush. We make decisions way too fast. We speak too quickly. We grasp for the things that we can manage. This is natural. But following Jesus means learning the sacred practice of slowing down. That means actually taking a breath. That means praying. That means sitting and learning the opposite of building. Learning that I don't have to plan here. Learning, dare I say, not speaking so fast. A non-anxious life, listen to me, isn't one without concern, but it's one that's anchored in the confidence that God is never late. And that's a practice to learn. He's leading us. And when we have the opportunity to pause just long enough to remember that, hope begins to grow again. And I need you to hear me say this. Hope isn't just optimism, okay? It's remembering that even when God seems silent, guess what? He's still good. The Israelites forgot this. They remembered Egypt more than they remember God's deliverance. And again, we do the same. When we forget God's past faithfulness, his present silence feels unbearable. So here's the invitation for you and I this morning. We need to learn to remember deliberately. Remember deliberately. We're about to do that with communion here in just a second. But what does it look like for us to remember deliberately when the table isn't before us? When we go back to work this week? Well, before we reach for the phone or check our plans, maybe we need to simply just learn to pause and name one way that God's been faithful to you. Man, what a practice. What's that one answered prayer? What's that one moment of provision? What's that one evidence of grace? Can I encourage you, whatever that thing is, say it out loud. Don't just simply write it down. God, you have been gracious to me here. You have been patient with me here. I have seen you provide for me this morning. Oh my gosh, I have breath in my lungs. What a blessing. Whatever it is, thank him for it. Because when we begin to do that, listen, remembrance begins to reorder our perspective. Like gratitude gives an opportunity to grow and it becomes louder than our anxieties. So as you remember, surrender. Each day this week, seriously, take one thing that feels out of control. A person, a responsibility, a problem, a fear, whatever it is. And simply pray, Father, this belongs to you. This belongs to you. I don't need to manage it. I don't need to control it. I just need you to be faithful in it. What a prayer. And then as soon as you pray, you ready for this? Let it go. That's the hard part. That's the hard part. But when we let it go, we give an opportunity to stop ourselves from building calves from our imaginations. It gives us a chance to stop rehearsing what we can't control. It gives us an opportunity to practice trust. Loved ones, God is still forming you even when you can't see the progress. We can be successful, but only through his faithfulness, not by our speed, not by our management. Some of us know exactly what the valley feels like because you're probably in it right now. You've been in it before. If you've never been in it, hey, keep living. You're gonna get to a spot or you're in a spot where you're waiting for clarity and change and it just hasn't come. And you're not necessarily angry at God, you're just tired. Tired of waiting, tired of hoping, tired of feeling like you're being ignored. And maybe somewhere along the way of all of this is when you start to build. And it's not out of rebellion, it's just out of survival. And usually, those things that we build look good on the outside. They give us a spot of security and rest and respect and productivity and responsibility. But those things that we build will not give us life. And this story shows us how heavy those things are, how hollow those things are, and how gentle God is to us to say, you don't have to keep building. Listen, in this story, what I love, he's still on the mountain, but we know that through Jesus, he has come to us. He has done everything necessary to save us. He has made us holy and righteous, not based off anything that we've done, but because how faithful that he is for us. And because he's faithful, loved ones, we can trust that he's still working on our behalf. Our wilderness moments, they weren't meant to break us. They're meant to bring us back to that truth. It's meant to remind us that God is still good, to bring us back to dependency, to allow us to live in intimacy, to trust in this quiet presence that he has and trust and believe that it's enough for us, even when we can't see what he's doing. So maybe the invitation for us is simply to stop building, start believing again. Stop building, start believing again. Let the thing that you're trying to build fall apart. And believe after it falls apart that you're not a failure. Or we believe in that he's still good. That we can trust in the one who will never let us down. Again, if you need proof that you've never been abandoned, just look to the cross. Whatever that thing is that's gonna fall apart, listen, let it fall at the feet of Jesus. Trust that he is good and enough. So this week, when silence comes, don't rush to fill it. Invite God into it. Sometimes the space where we feel fear most is the very space that he's forming faith. And I believe that he wants to do that in us because he is still writing grace into our stories, even when we're learning how to wait. He's still faithful. Do we believe that to be true? Let me pray to that end. Father, we confess how quickly we are to forget, how quick we are to try to fill in the spaces that we can't see. How often we try to control only the things that you can truly carry. God, we confess those things. We confess that we've turned your gifts into idols. Teach us to wait. Teach us to trust. Teach us to believe. Teach us to rest in the truth that silence, even as long as it goes, is never your absence. Help us to believe that it's you building and doing something inside of us. Make us become people that stop building and start believing. We ask these things in Jesus' powerful name. Amen.